Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Jen from Sundae Baubles, and I am thrilled to be here with you for Sundae Brunch. I hope everyone's having an absolutely wonderful holiday week, if you can still call it that. We've got New Year's up ahead of us. Christmas is past. We're in the middle of Hanukkah. I hope everyone is celebrating with family, having a wonderful time, enjoying some good food, and making good memories. I'm going to put on my glasses so that I can actually see the comments and say hello. It is wonderful to see you. Hello, Jessica, Charlene, Delia, Aria, Lee, Robin, Deborah, Michelle, Barb, Peg. Wow, so many people here already. Marlene, I saw Debonics as well. We've got Sue that is here. I know I've got a little bit of a lag on the comments, so I'm going to do my best to keep up. We have an exciting show today, all about Georgian jewelry, and actually I'll comment on some of the jewelry that I'm wearing right now. I've got on an amatory pendant that we will definitely take a look at, and you will get a much closer look at this ring as well. It is Bristol blue glass with some diamonds and a turquoise half hoop. Now, we're going to go into detail over Georgian jewelry, but first we need to talk a little bit about the Georgian period. What is it exactly, and why did we choose to name an era of time or a period of time after 4 kings when there were actually 5 rulers and many other things happening in the world? We're going to jump right in. But first, please make sure that you type #win in all caps, and I've pinned a comment as well. We will do a drawing for a exclusive Sundae Baubles brunch mug at the end of the show, and we'll be covering all sorts of wonderful jewelry today, and I hope that you will leave comments for me. Let me know what you think, if you want me to give you more details on any of the pieces too. My goal today is to not only cover the Georgian jewelry period and some of our key wonderful motifs and pieces, but also to give you some really close in-depth looks at pieces in my collection so that you can identify the traits and the features as well, so that when you are out jewelry hunting, you may spot something and you may recognize something and see that it is an important antique that maybe you can scoop up for a great price. It is lovely to see you all. Without further ado, let's take a quick look at a snapshot of Georgian jewelry pieces. Here you see a variety of things, from paste to pearls, amethyst, glass, precious metals, so much going on here. And what's interesting is that as I dug through my collection and started to pull out pieces for today, I realized that the majority of my pieces fall into a very specific time frame within the Georgian era. But first, the Georgian era spans from 1714 to 1835. There are essentially 4 King Georges that ruled during that period: the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And then we've got King William. So he ruled until 1837, that is. And because there were so many Georges for such a span of period in England, that is how the period really got its name. Now, we would be, wrong to not acknowledge that during this period and during the overall Georgian period, there was a lot going on, including the French Revolution, including so much cultural shifts, technology shifts as well. So the Georgian name has stuck, and it is what people are often aware of. But there's also other terms that'll come into place, like the Regency period, which is around 1780 timeframe. And especially when it comes to fashion style, you will hear about Regency style as well. But for our purposes, we're going to break out the period into 3 sections. The 18th century core, so really what came to be from 1714, and in fashion they say about 1720 to 1780. And those styles were very romantic dresses, a lot of florals, you'll see lace, and you'll see parures, all sorts of wonderful pieces. And then around 1780, Neoclassicism really started to show up, and you see these Grecian gowns, you see sort of a column look, and you see a return to the revival periods of ancient Rome and Greece, and that is reflected in so much design as well. And then we have the pre-Victorian era, which is really 1810 onward. So the French Revolution's happening, from 1789. There's a lot that's going on, and there's a dramatic shift. But from around 1810, we start to see some shifts in what people wore. They were very large sleeves, large gowns, big earrings sometimes went to counter that too, and a lot of chains were worn too. And there is a distinct shift in the jewelry. But in today's live, we are really going to focus on what I call the Neoclassic sort of period. 1760 to about 1810 is where my sweet spot in my collection is. Now, Georgian era materials. Here are common pieces that you're going to see. Rock crystal, paste, and paste is, of course, glass that is made with lead, and it shines like crazy, and I'll show you some examples of that. We've got foil-back stones, garnet, amethyst, topaz, citrine, and peridot were all very, very popular. Rose cuts when it comes to diamonds, as well as the rough cuts, and pearls. And of course, pearls carry through as well as all of these other materials. But as we move towards the later era, you start to see coral, carnelian, agate, and turquoise show up more and more as well. Now, a lot of people, I see Deborah's question, are very interested in Georgian jewelry now. And the reason is because it is so rare. What's tough, though, is that when there's a rare item on the market and a lot of demand, that's where you start to see some reproductions. And of course, there was a Georgian jewelry revival in the Victorian period and again in the 20th century as well. So we all need to be very aware and know what to look for. And we will take a look at a special piece. I won't show it to you yet because it's part of our guessing game at the end of this lesson, but there is a lot of demand. Now, jewelry, if you think about what was technologically available, was very difficult to make during those periods. Everything was handcrafted, so it was scarce. Even costume jewelry, so jewelry that was made out of paste or less precious metals, were very sought after and rare, and most common people were not able to afford jewels. So this is why it is so sought after. It's scarce. It's hard to find, and when you can find pieces in good condition, they can be of very high value. Now, with relation to those materials that we were just talking about, here are some examples. We've got some coral in a brooch with hair, chrysoberyl. You see a lot of amethyst and citrines, garnet, agates, pearls, and topaz. Both pink topaz and imperial topaz, which is more of an orangey color, were very, very special. And often these gemstones were emulated by putting foil under stones to reflect back the color. Now, today, modern stones are often treated to help make them more vibrant. But back in the Georgian period, there were not really any treatments other than applying colored foil underneath the stones themselves. So if you take a look on the far right side of the screen, that is pink topaz, but it also has hot pink foil underneath it to make it look as vibrant as it does there. It wouldn't be that vibrant without it. Now, when it comes to the styles of Georgian era jewelry, we've got Riviere necklaces, parures, and demi-parures, so sets of jewelry that were very, very popular in the 18th century, and this continued on as well. Portrait miniatures, ribbon and lace chokers, and aigrettes, or jewelry for the hair. Often they were the en tremblant variety that could shake and would tremble essentially as you wore it. And then we've got in 1794, festoon jewelry, necklaces that really became popular. And they almost echoed the masts and looks of what was worn in the hair to echo ships, which was popularized by Marie Antoinette. We've got miniatures, chains, lover's eyes, which we'll talk about. Large earrings were all the rage to counter big gowns. Quizzing glasses, tiaras, and hair combs as well. And then canatille jewelry, which is also recognized as being Georgian, is really more common right at the turn of the 18th century. And we'll take a look at that and why they are, or why canatille was popular. Now, we will also jump in and talk about some popular motifs before we start to look at some examples. So in terms of, the romance of the earlier part of the Georgian era, we do see a lot of bows, birds, animals, people, nature, whether it's flowers or feathers. There's also a continuation of the memento mori, or remember that you will die movement from the 17th century, where you see some skulls and skeletons, but this starts to shape more into urns as we get into the Neoclassical period. We've also got a lot of amatory jewelry too that nods back into history. You'll see columns, you'll see all sorts of wonderful things. And so, without further ado, let's jump into looking at a few of the pieces that are in my collection. And I'm going to point out the details as we look at these pieces together so you know exactly what you're looking at and what you will be looking for. Lover eyes are so rare, Charlene, and they are on many, many people's wish lists. And the important thing to know about them is that they're often reproduced, and there are some pretty wild techniques out there now that people are using to try and make them seem as original as possible. So, for example, what some people are doing is they're actually cutting out pieces of original paintings from the period of an eye, and then they'll set it underneath a crystal from a recycled mourning brooch that would have had hair or something else before. So we must keep our eyes peeled, but I will give you some tips and tricks on how to be sure to recognize, one, that it's real. There are so many reproductions. We must be careful. Hello, Crazy May. Hello, Catherine, Kathleen, and Aria. It is great to see you all. Hello, Bonica. Okay, so the first up, we are going to take a look at something that you may have seen before in my collection, and I promise you, I'll be showing you things that you've never seen before today too. But we've got to start somewhere, and we're going to start with this guilloche enamel urn ring. Let's take a look at the video, and then we're going to break it down. So you can see as the light reflects on the background that there is sort of engine-churned metal that is covered in a green enamel. And then we've got a white urn on the front. There's a rock crystal that goes over top of all of this and caps it. And then it is in a gold setting. And so what we're going to do is we are going to take a look at the details of this ring. So to begin with, it has the motif of this neoclassical urn, but it also has that mourning jewelry aspect to it. Again, focus your eye on the guilloche. So I've tried to put a little box around it. You can see that it is not just the swirls, but also almost like a star sort of radiating ray look underneath. There's our urn, and in white enamel. Now, white, blue, and black, as well as green enamel were the most common colors used, but green was the most uncommon. Blue was generally reserved for royals. We've got black that was used for everyone, and white was used primarily for children and virgins. So green, when it was used, was really meant to suggest new life, really, in this case, it would be something that represented probably a child that died too young, and then, looking towards rebirth or new life to come afterwards. If you take a look from the side profile, when you've got a rock crystal covering something, it is not going to actually touch the piece. So I tried to capture this in the photograph so that you can see that it sits above. It is set, again, it's sort of bezel set over top of this urn piece that's attached to the bottom. And often you'll find pieces that have little seed pearls or even rose-cut diamonds that are embedded into the urn as well. So really special pieces. And then this is where you will note the rock crystal. You can see that reflection. The other thing to note in Georgian rings in particular is that they are often shaped in a way that it sits onto the finger and almost hugs it. So it's like it's got a scooped out center. And we'll take a look at a few other examples like this too, but it's something to recognize. The other piece that you can look for is when you've got a very rounded shank like this, it's really easy to detect if there's any sizing, so keep your eyes open. So the back side of a ring is a really important place to check on Georgian jewelry. Sometimes you will see engraving, sometimes you will see a bubble if it is something that is foil backed, but on rings, generally, especially if they are of the morning variety, they're going to have this sort of domed shape that's going to fit on the finger. Now, next up, we're going to talk about a similar motif. It is a carved stone urn cameo. Again, this one is from around 1780, and we've got the same sort of motif where we've got an urn and then we've got a weeping willow as well. Now, stick pins from the Georgian period have some very specific details to them, and that's why I want to share this example with you today. So in this stick pin, and you'll notice on the back of this one, we've also got a hair panel underneath a piece of glass. The glass is unfortunately cracked, but it is still intact. But there's some important things to note. So one, again, cameos, and whether they were shell or hardstone, were very popular from the 1780s especially. You can see this one has been carved, so we've got that detail to look at. There's also some black enameling just on the outside of it. And then on the back, with the way that this has been attached, you have what I call almost the Aries symbol that is very common to see in Georgian jewelry. This is how they were attaching things. Now, one more piece that is very distinctive in Georgian stick pins is having this almost barbershop pole type of engraving. It's like a deeply sort of beveled swirl. So look for that, and that is a very good indication that you have an older stick pin. You aren't going to see those on later Victorian stick pins, nor will you see them on stick pins from the 20th century as well. So keep your eyes peeled for that. Hello, Jake Garr. Hello, Shauna. Hello, Donna. It is great to see you all. Next up, we are going to take a look at an amatory brooch. Now, again, this one is in line with the Neoclassical symbolism. So again, from that 1780s period. And we start to see some of the birds that were really, really common, especially in the amatory pieces. And we've got a plinth with a flaming heart on it as well. So let's take a look at the details. It is also really common to see on the back of these pieces a piece of silk. It's common to mistake this for very, very finely woven hair if it's in a natural color, but when you see this very sort of lined up, almost pinstripe pattern, that is a good indication that it is a woven material that is actually not hair. So here again, we have the bird in the hand, and we've got our plinth with our flaming heart on it as well. And it is, again, very much in line with the next amatory brooch that we're going to look at. Again, we've got our nature motif, and there's quite a few details in here that, again, are timed for the 1780s period. Now here, the dress that the woman is wearing is very much in line with sort of that more low-cut and Grecian style, very close to the body column dress. When we look at the details, again, we're going to see a bird with a feather, and that is bringing good omens. We've got a dog for fidelity. It's very common to see dogs in these. We've got a lovely lamb, and this has to do with motherhood and also shepherding. So in a lot of ways, religion was tied into these pieces, whether they're sentimental or amatory or mourning. And then we have another amatory pendant with a very similar feel to it. And this is the one that I am wearing today. Again, we've got a woman who's feeding a lamb, again with a lightweight dress from that 1780s period. And what's really interesting to see is that there's also the demarcation between her and the gentleman behind the fence that is showing us the sense of propriety. She's feeding the lamb, as you can see. She's holding a little bit of something for it. And there you have it. There is space between them that is suggesting that, they're very proper. They're behaving correctly as one should in those times and days. Now, this is another neoclassic example, and it is a sulfide brooch. And it is one that you have seen before. This I recently added to my collection, and it is really a Roman depiction. We've got soldiers, they're holding shields, swords. We also have what appears to be some sort of ox behind it too. And these really were popularized only for a short period of time because of the effort it took to make them. I've got a whole video on that. If you'd like, I can link it to you as well. But what I want to draw your attention to on this is also to the collet setting, which is really common. So often things were set into metal with a bezel, and then we have a cut down collet, and this is what you see, where you've got almost these little like rivet marks or bumps that are all around it. And it's important to differentiate those that are more handmade from those that are machine made, because in the Victorian period, they did continue to use some collet setting, and in the Revival period, they really, really overused it. And keep that little tip in mind for when we do our guessing game later. And finally, we've got an enamel piece, again, a neoclassical enamel piece with pearls. Now, what's important to note is that pearls in this period, when they're true pearls, they are completely natural. And you can really tell with the variation of these. If you look at about 1 o'clock or so, you've got one pearl that's almost worn down, but they're very well matched, which is, hard to find things that are in size. And in Georgian jewelry, you'll find that settings are made to suit whatever the material is at hand. So whether it is a stone or piece of glass, it is essentially going to be formed around that item rather than set in what we do today, which is really build a setting to set an item into. And then finally, we have in our neoclassical section this opaline grillos fob that I've shown you before as well. Now, opaline glass was something that was very popular, not only in jewelry, but in vanity sets, in small caskets to hold jewelry during the period. And if we take a look at this opaline Riviere necklace, that's the Riviere necklace is the one that is on the outside. We've got collet set opaline, and then we also have beaded opaline just on the inside. We've got a cross as well. And on the left-hand side, we have a paste and opaline ring, which would have shimmered like nothing in the candlelight. It would have been absolutely incredible. And here is a really common style that was popularized during the Victorian period. So these are girandole earrings, and they have the pendeloque drops that are coming from them. So these were very, very typical of something that you would see at any of the great balls. And what I want to draw your attention to is that bow motif as well. So again, you'll see a lot of these bow motifs in Georgian jewelry. Now, let's get into the materials and the techniques. We'll start with diamonds. Now, diamonds were essentially rough cut. You've seen this before. It's the evolution of diamond cuts. Before diamond saws were invented at the very tail end of the 19th century, the way that diamonds were cut was essentially by hacking them. Over time, they found new ways to be able to grind them as well in order to hand facet them. But until they really started to develop these wheels, they were really being sort of cleaved. This is where we see a lot of the point cuts, the table cuts, and even some of the old single cuts. Now, with the Mazarin cut, it is a little bit more of a square cut, and it is sort of the first foray into round cut diamonds. Peruzzis as well lean towards the evolution as they're trying to add more and more facets to reflect the light. Rose-cut diamonds sort of fall in between that Mazarin and Peruzzi timeframe, where they're trying to create many, many facets. But what is interesting is that rose cuts weren't always in the rose shape that you see. Rose cuts used to refer to pieces that were just sort of cleaved down into a shape that had that shimmer to it. And I'm going to show you an example. But first, let's look at these Giardinetti rings. So if you take a look at these, we've got quite a few diamonds, and you'll see that they have been cleaved or shaped in a way to maximize their size and their brilliance, because diamonds were not easy to come by, and then the settings were made around them. Now, it's the same thing for the other stones that are in these pieces. And keep in mind, giardinetti rings are also some of the most commonly reproduced. So if you ever see a piece that looks too perfect in that the diamonds don't look like they were hand faceted, and if you look at the other stones too, it's the same thing. There'll be a little bit of an unevenness to them, and that should add to part of the charm. In the garnet and the rubies that you see as well, you've got that same sort of unevenness to them. And again, we've got the collet settings that is holding them into place, as modern prongs as we know it really weren't introduced until the mid-19th century. So there was prongs that are holding things, but also a lot of bezels to reinforce. I want to show you this morning ring in detail, and I want you to pay particular attention as I play the video to the diamonds, because you're going to see that they're irregularly cut. And these are considered rose-cut diamonds, but they're very primitive. And as you can see, they really are designed to sort of catch the light. They're faceted, but there's a very primitive element to them. So that is what a early rose-cut diamond would look like. And this is from about 1780. I'm going to add this back. Again, it fits in with that neoclassical revival. We've got our urn motif with garlands as well. And we'll take a look on the back. This one was engraved for Anne Jeffrey. It is a mourning ring, and basically it is sharing with us that she would have passed on the 7th of March in 1780, and the age was 74 years, which is really quite advanced in age for that early in time. So this is a precious, special piece. Again, if you think about the diamonds, when you are looking for genuine Georgian pieces, it is highly unusual to see them all perfectly cut. So if you do see something where all of the diamonds are evenly matched, both in color, in size, in cut, that could be an indication that the piece is not necessarily a true antique. It could be something that was fabricated later. All right. Now, foiling is a technique that was used, as I mentioned, not only to bring out the color in colored gemstones by adding colored foil underneath, but it was also designed to enhance the reflectivity of things. So foil was often put underneath diamonds, put underneath paste, and even put underneath some blue Bristol glass. So this ring that I'm wearing is the one that we're going to take a look at next. Here it is in a still so that you can get a look at it. We've got a fleur-de-lis on a backing of blue glass. And what I want to show you is the video so that you can actually see how the diamonds are roughly cut. The foil behind this blue glass also causes it to reflect and almost have waves like an ocean. So this is what is known as a bague de firmament or a Bristol blue glass ring. These rings were very popular around 1780, and often they were inset with lots and lots of diamonds, and it was meant to replicate the night sky. So I'm going to play this one more time, just so that we can also talk about the back in detail as well as the side. So again, the reflection is just so magical. It kind of pulls you in like a pool of water. Now, when we turn it to the side, you're going to see some engraving, and often Georgian jewelry will have little hidden details like this engraving on the side. That is another good indicator of the handcrafted work. And if you take a look behind, you see that it is shaped for the finger. So again, it's got that domed shape that we were talking about earlier. Let's take a look at the stills in more detail. And hello, Marketplace Boutique. It's great to see you. Hello, Doug. Great to see you as well. Happy New Year's. So here we have it. When you flip it over, and it's best shown in this photo rather than if I was to try to hold it up to the camera, you can see that it really is sort of a carved out, sort of hollowed center, and it fits the hand just beautifully and comfortably as well. Now, with these rings, it's important to note gold was very, very scarce during the Georgian period. They hadn't yet discovered many of the masses that were available. So it was often hammered very, very thin. And so this ring, despite looking like it would be quite heavy, really is only heavy because of the glass that is inside of it. It is very, very lightweight, and it is not solid, even though it is solidly made. So we've here, I want to draw your attention to some of the detail work as well. This is almost like a sort of pie crust setting where they've done what is almost like some early indentations that are leading up to mill grain. And so that is one of the other details that is on both this piece and also the pendant that I'm wearing as well. And here's a view from the front so that you can take a look at the details. And then finally, the fleur-de-lis. So the fleur-de-lis, obviously very strong national symbol in France, but was also one that was commonly used all throughout different areas of Europe. It was used in England too. Sometimes you can judge based on the fine details of who it was crafted for. So for example, the Florentine fleur-de-lis will have more embellishment and more details than one that is meant for France. And then last but not least, of course, we've got the reflection. So again, if you are looking for a bague au firmament, you will want to make sure that when the light hits it, that you see some extra reflection as well. So it should not just be like a solid piece of glass. It should have a little bit of life and movement based on how the light is hitting it. All right. Now, pastes are the next piece that we're going to talk about. Pastes are very special. Now, diamonds, again, as we talked about, were very scarce, and it was hard to find them in large sizes. So the solution to that was to create them. And this was done essentially by creating a glass, but also adding lead and some say sand and different materials, which created an incomparable shine. To make pastes shine even brighter, as mentioned, they were also foil-backed. So I'm going to hold this up. It is blinding. You can probably see almost no details. This is a button, a Georgian button. Could you imagine being most likely a gentleman and having a row of these buttons? You would light up any party. Let's take a look at the details. So this shows you, not much clearer, but a little more clearly, some of the details that we're seeing. So we've got what looks like pie pieces as well as primitive round cuts. And as we play the video, what I want you to watch for is the black dots that are in the middle of each of these paste stones, because this is what is known as black dot paste. And here we have it. Now look closely, almost like a culet that you would find in a diamond, there is a black dot. And there's also some black material that is holding all of these paste stones in place, which was a common construction technique. And there we have it. You're able to really see right center stream. Now, what is also common in these pieces, because they are all hand faceted, is that these facets are never going to be even or equal, and some of them will be a little bit rough, which is exactly why I'm leaving this piece on screen for just a second or two, so that you can see not only the culet, but you can also see the uneven faceting. Now let's go back. Again, this has a natural motif, so a little bit floral. And there's the back of the button. Yes, Deborah. And so black dot paste, there, I've tried to circle one of the dots, is important to recognize that it is not what some people purport it to be. Some people say that it was a black dot of paint that was added to make a diamond look like it had, or a paste look like it had an open culet. But the reality is the look of the open culet came later. So that was not what they were thinking about when they were fabricating these pieces. The black dot is actually from black tar that was used in order to set these pastes into pieces. They would put a little bit of sort of black tar material. It wasn't just tar, it was a mixture of different things, but it was a primitive glue and it had a black look to it. And that is what black dot paste is. So let's take a look in more detail. we've got the black dot there. And again, I hope you kept your eyes peeled, because the way that this is set, this is not actually a metal that is in between. This is that sort of gummy black substance. I see a question from Doug. Are all paste stones foil backed? No, they are not all foil backed. Some are, some aren't. And I would say that the majority that I have seen are not. So it really depends on the look of the designer. And I'm going to show you another paste brooch right away, which is not foil backed. So let's move ahead to that. Here it is. Perfect timing. Thank you, Doug. So this is an example of a brooch, and I wanted to show you all sides of it before we jump in and take a look at the video. And you'll be able to see again the even more clear black dot paste effect in this as we play the video. Let me just remove it for a minute. So this one is large and in charge. Now I'm calling it a brooch, but arguably this may have been a buckle and would have been one of two that would have belonged over possibly a man's shoe. I have very, very wide feet, and if I put this over the widest part of my foot, it actually perfectly curves in with it. Now, I like to use it as a shoulder brooch now, or as a choker. It works really, really well on a cord, and it's almost period appropriate. You will see that this one has great reflection too, even though it's not foil backed. So let me play a video for you, which will allow you to see a little bit more detail. So, and you'll see there's a little bit of yellowing to some of these as they get older, but they sparkle like nothing else. Yes, Doug, it really is the composition, and it's about having lead inside. And as we zoom closer and closer, you're going to be able to see that these have more of that mazarin or almost Perusi cut to them. So they are not a round cut, and they are certainly not even. And you can make out that black dot very, very well in the center and see how they were set. And again, we're going to look through the details of this piece so that you can get a really good look at them as well. So let's remove the video and add the photos back. So when we look in, you'll see that they're very uneven. The centers will even have different sizes. And not only do the centers have different sizes, but the facets around the centers do as well. And they are not perfectly round. They certainly will never be perfectly symmetrical. So that is a good indication that you've got an antique paste piece. And we would be remiss not to talk about paste Rivieres. So the Riviere necklace, or what seemed to be sort of an end-to-end, ever-flowing necklace of gemstones or glass around a neck, was very popular during the Georgian period. And they came in all colors. In this case, our example is green. And this one is, call it bezel set. We've got that bubble back that those paste stones are set into. And then we also have a few other details that are very specific. So one, we can take a look at that setting. Now you don't actually see the collet marks, but they are bezel set. It's how it's enclosed. And then we've got our bubble back, all handcrafted. This is the box clasp. So with a proper Riviere necklace, the clasp will always have the same stone or paste on it. So it looks like it's endless as it circles around the neck. And here's the front view of the clasp, which just disguises beautifully into the necklace. I see Doug has another question. Do they still make paste stones today? Well, you can argue that they sure do, but is it anything like the old paste? No. Most glass and crystal is now lead-free, and it really is the lead that added to the scintillation. So people do absolutely make costume jewelry with glass and paste, but if you compare even the pastes of the 20th century costume jewelry to those of the Georgian period, there's a pretty big difference to them. So while people do refer often to glass in general as paste, it is not true paste as the antique was. It's a very good question. All right, now next up, Yes, Deborah, it's sort of glue resin. I call it tar. It's black, and that's why you've got that sort of black dot underneath it where they'd adhere it. I do not have a recipe for you, but I can certainly try to find one to tell you exactly what all of the materials are. But it is a very primitive sort of glue that was created. Now, next up, we're going to talk about cut steel. Now, cut steel was another item that was used, and take a look at the way it shimmers. This was also meant to replicate diamonds, and under candlelight, it was as popular as diamonds, and even royalty would wear it. So let's take a look. Here we've got another motif that is nature. It is meant to look like a bit of a butterfly. And on top of that, we also have some moon motifs to it. And what we'll look at is the back riveting technique as well. Now, it's actually not that hard to find a cut steel piece or two in the market, but when you do look for them, make sure that you're getting pieces that do not have a lot of rust. And in my personal opinion, I like to find pieces that have a little bit of a special something to it. So in this example, we've got some little half moons that are included alongside the more stereotypical cut steel rivets and pieces that are there. And again, this riveting is what you want to look for, because this is an example of that hand fabrication. So this is, a really good telltale sign that something was of the period and not simply meant to reproduce it later, because we do have this same look that was mimicked during Victorian period, sometimes with gold-plated or even fine gold jewelry to create those reflective spheres. So keep that in mind. I also wanted to show you this tortoiseshell and mother of pearl brooch, because tortoiseshell and mother of pearl were also commonly used. And again, in this period example, we've got a few really, really good indicators that tell us that it's Georgian. One, we've got our pin stem that is extremely elongated. So as you can see, it is sticking out well past the border of the brooch. And then we also have a riveting construction that goes back to front. And I did not show it here. Allow me to show you a video to show you the riveting construction. So this is our tortoise shell inlaid, and here we can see the very, very long proper C-clasp pin, and you can see that it's actually a rivet construction that has been used to pull all of these pieces together, because you wouldn't have been able to weld it, and other than trying to bezel set it in some way, that just simply wouldn't have worked. And then ivory was also extremely common. Now, this is a wonderful piece in my collection that came to me by the way of Sue from Denim to Diamonds. And what's really special about this is that we managed to salvage it. Someone, somewhere along the way, stripped it of all of the gold that had been inset all around it. And this is a toothpick case. We will take a look at some photos as well, because I want you to be able to get a good look at the close-up of what is on the inside. So this toothpick case has some amatory details. We have a plinth, we have a dove that is diving towards it, and it's holding a heart. It's a little bit hard to see. That's on the left side, that is in sort of that pink. And then on the right side, we also have a cherub's arrows that are inside a sheath, and we also have a tree. So this is a really special toothpick case that someone did a disservice to, but it is absolutely going to remain. Wanted to show you when it opens. We've got just one single piece that has been carved, and then the details have been inlaid. So it is rock crystal that is over top of some gold foiling. I'm so glad they didn't rip that apart too. And here is an example of the damaged area, which once upon a time had probably gold filament that would have been either like hand hammered to create a design, because repoussé work was also very common during the Georgian period as well. All right, next up, we need to talk about pearls. And we are going to talk about this seed pearl pendant. So again, as we talked about earlier, Any natural pearls from this period are truly natural. They would have been hand harvested. They would have been found essentially by pearl divers who were searching in nature. This is well before any sort of oyster was being seeded with anything. And so to create a piece like this and to try to find uniform pearl sizes would have taken a long time. Pearls were extremely expensive. Now, this piece in particularly was likely part of a much bigger set. It was probably part of a parure that may have been used for a wedding or for another special occasion or event. These were often gifted as wedding gifts or for important ceremonies to women. And we're going to take a look at the construction because it is special. We'll look at the video first. So you can see that the back is actually mother of pearl that has been drilled, and you can see that there's a filament that has been used. Once upon a time, when I first saw one of these, I thought to myself, is that fishing line? Who on earth would have done that? But what was used is actually white horsehair. And these white horsehairs had to also be carefully harvested and saved, and then they were used in order to string in tiny, tiny little drill holes. And you can see in the center, we've also got that mother of pearl that has been fashioned. Here is the back. So we've got essentially holes to string through, string the pearl, and ultimately sew the pearls on the pieces. It would have taken a painstaking amount of work, and it is said that it was often young girls that would do this work who had very, very good eyesight, because again, this work would have been done back when there was no electricity. So imagine first finding the pearls, finding the horsehair, hand drilling the pearls, hand drilling the mother of pearl, stringing it all together. It's amazing that these pieces survive. Now let's take a look in a little bit more detail at the back so that you can see. It's up to debate as to whether it looks sloppy or not on the back, but the back is not what is shown when you wear it. They're really, truly spectacular pieces. There's a close-up so that you can get an even better look to see. There's obviously method that has been used in terms of doing this stringing, but to me, it looks a little bit wild. And in that center piece, that is obviously the piece that is going to hold the sort of center core to the front piece as well. Now, this is another example of a seed pearl brooch, and I was admiring this one yesterday preparing for this live, and was actually really surprised to notice a detail that I hadn't seen before, which I'm going to share with you right now. So this is the reverse, and we've got, again, that mother of pearl. You can kind of make out where the horsehair is, and we've got a gold pin, a long one as you would expect, appropriate to the period as well. But what surprised me is not the pin, it's not the backing, although this half moon pin style is very common in a lot of these pieces. But what surprised me was that if you take a look through the middle, you can peekaboo and see that there's actually a second layer that is in there. And even though no one would have probably gotten close enough to see that detail, there is a full sort of second row that includes both the large pearls and the small pearls that were designed. So, with this Georgian jewelry, the attention is really in the details. It's amazing how much effort that they put into each and every one of these pieces. And that is another one of the tips to look for is, even if it's in a little bit rough shape because it's older, there's certainly pearls that are missing on these pieces, as you can see. They're incredibly well made. So there's a lot of effort that went into crafting them. All right, we're going to jump into portrait miniatures next, because portrait miniatures were incredibly important. You got a sneak peek of this one as I flashed my screen. This is not in my collection. This is in the V&A's collection, but we have an opaline jewelry casket that also has an enamel on it, and it has portraits, little miniatures. It's incredibly well done. Now, Why were miniatures popular? Well, pre-photography, this was the way that you would be able to be close to somebody or have them near you when they weren't. So the idea of sitting for a portrait was extremely romantic, or, it ties to family. So it was very key as part of the ceremonies. If you've seen the movie Marie Antoinette, gosh, probably from late 90s or early 2000s, there's a scene where the king is reviewing miniatures of his potential bride-to-bes, and you've got Marie Antoinette that also sees a miniature of her husband-to-be for the first time. This is how people learned what others would look like. So they were very, very important. Now, these portraits and the enamels in particular can be done with fantastic detail. This one has a mourning theme to it. So we have a young woman who's absolutely beside herself. She's got a bird that has passed away. So the idea of this one is sort of love that is either unrequited or hasn't been met. Really, really special pieces. And then as we look at this one, we've got another portrait. This is most likely of a member of the royal family, not identified. And then there are also simply more neoclassical designs too. So this is another enamel portrait miniature that is backed with the Prince of Wales hair sort of feather look to it, which is one of the designs for sentimental hair. So not all hair jewelry is going to be mourning jewelry. Now, what I want to share with you is this example from my collection, and we're going to take a video of it. So when it comes to caskets, the enamel work that's done on them is a little, and jewelry caskets specifically, it's a little bit different than what you'll see on those enamel portraits that are made as portraits or for jewelry. So I'm going to play a video for you, and this is a conversion piece. So it was once upon a time a jewelry casket lid, and what was done was it was converted to a brooch. So if you take a look, you can see in the reflection on the enamel, not only the brush strokes, but also almost like a 3D effect. And this is very common to see on pieces that were larger. So again, as we sort of shake it in the light, you're going to see those details. There's also iridescent enamel, which is very hard to find and quite precious. And there's some gold enameling in there too. And we'll play this and we'll do one more video too to show you. So enamels typically were painted on either copper or precious metal. And this is the back. So this is the back that you would see. And we've got layers of enamel that has actually started to peel away from that oxidized piece of copper. So that's why I wanted to show you that view. And again, we've got that sort of iridescent, shimmering quality, lots and lots of bows to it, all the motifs that you would expect to find. Again, that amatory plinth that's got a heart that is flaming on it as well. So quite an interesting piece. And this one had been turned into a brooch sometime in antiquity. It came to me this way. It is large. When I wear it reinforced. So I think I've shared with you my trick where I use just a makeup remover pad behind my shirt so that I'm able to clip it on, and it makes sure that it's going to have enough support. But we also have fine enamels of portraits. And so this little beauty, which there's no way that you're going to be able to see it, we're going to take a look at it next. So allow me to continue with the photos. And again, here's the back. You can tell that this is something that was not original to it. It's definitely a brooch conversion. Lids were commonly affixed in this way, as you can see. And it is common to see sort of that oxidization too on the back of enamel work. And this is our portrait. So I will share a video of this with you, but this I added this to my collection many, many years ago because it felt to me like they were two sisters. And as you may know, I am a twin. So I always look for things that remind me of sisters and twin sisters. And this was a prime example. So let's play the video of this, and you're going to notice in the details that it has a much smoother appearance. There is a line in it that would have happened during the kiln firing, which you can see about 1 o'clock on this. But it has a very smooth appearance to it. You can make out the brush strokes just barely, but you can even see the blush on the cheeks of these women. There we have it. So again, these types of enamels, they take a lot of craft work and a lot of experience in order to execute, because these enamels were done essentially by depositing powders onto a copper or gold plate of metal, and they would be fired, and they would be fired one layer at a time. And when things are fired, as you've probably seen, it's like a hot pan. It'll go bright red, but it's not obvious what color it is anymore. So very, very difficult in order to layer just the right colors and create a painting in enamel. They're truly special. Now, next up, we have a certain monsieur that is another portrait miniature, but this one is done on vellum. So portrait miniatures could be done on enamel, they could be done on card, they could be done on ivory, or they could be done on vellum. And this is an older one. You can date many of these miniatures in part by the costumes of the people who are portrayed, as well as the materials that were used to fabricate the piece. So let me pull up, I believe I've got a video of this one as well. And I'll pull that up and play it for you. And I've tried to get in close so that you can see the details. But this one has sort of a smooth look to it. He's got a very interesting cravat, and his eyes are just so piercing. And this is not a ring that I wear often. Take a look at the way this has been set. So again, there is a crystal over top of the painting. And then we've got a sort of a primitive type of setting around it, not modern day prongs as you would later see. Now let's add this back. This is the side view of the ring. It is quite thick, but again, even though it looks like it's thick, it's actually a very thin sheet of gold that has essentially been hammered out, and it is hollow on the inside. So this is a very, very lightweight piece because, again, gold was scarce. And one detail that I do want to draw your attention to, in addition to the engraving, is to the almost what I would call like Triton spear ring shank, because this is another really common detail that you're going to see in Georgian jewelry. So again, with the setting, vellum was made out of animal's skin. Or technically it's not skin, it's actually, I believe the intestines is what was used. So same as what was used in like the books of hours for illuminated manuscripts. Ooh, there we go. And so on the back, we've got some engraving, those fine details, again, sort of supporting the very rustic prongs and that Triton-like composition that you'll see for the ring shank. And last, but certainly not least, in the miniature category is this portrait miniature. So this is a locket that is front to back, and I'm going to just remove this for a moment so I can hold it up. And these are my ancestors, not really, I call them my instant ancestors. I loved having both a man and a woman. Arguably, she's not the prettiest lady that would have been at the ball, but she certainly has a lot of character. But this piece is very special because it has early construction details to it that I am excited to share with you. So let me walk you through a couple of details, and then I'll play a video as well. So this is a gold frame that is set with a pin to keep it closed. And if you remove the glass, and we're only going to take a look at one side of this because I don't love to take it apart, you can see the detail. This one is painted on card, and it is very old. Now, what is interesting is that when I say it's painted on card, it is literally attached to a card as well. So paper was also a sort of hot commodity that was not easy to come by in the Georgian period. And so people would often repurpose things. And in this case, we actually have old playing cards that are used. So I will now share another video with you. Let me pull this out. First, we'll take a look at our dear lady. And you bet I was careful as I took this apart and did my videotaping. You can see the tiny little brush strokes and the different effect of the paints that were used. If you zoom in close on these portrait miniatures, it's actually kind of astonishing to see the level of detail in them. I am not a skilled artist by any means, and it always blows my mind how what can sometimes appear to be like a sloppy brushstroke can actually result in such an incredible image that looks like something. The bow in her hair is really something else as well. All right, so now that we've gotten acquainted with the front of this madame, we are going to take a look at what is on the back. So let me load one more video, and here it is. So as I carefully flip this around, we have a handmade playing card. And so it was very common that sometimes handmade playing cards would be used for exactly this purpose. So we will pause it and I will let you take a look. There we go. And you can see that this is something that would have been inked by hand. And it's really quite a special piece. I'm still researching this couple, and this piece has been in my possession for well over a decade, but I am always very hopeful that perhaps the award, the military award that the gentleman is wearing will reveal who he is. To this day, I've not found anything, and I have reached out to a few different miniature researchers. So keep your fingers crossed, and I will keep you posted. Now, Lee, you're asking what types of paint were being used. So all different types. They could use watercolors, they could use oils. There's a whole variety, and I don't know exactly what was used on these. I would say it's most likely going to be probably an oil-based paint, but again, not an artist. I have just purchased a book on portrait miniatures. It's at like 700 pages that is coming to me from the UK. So as soon as I have more information, we will do a deep dive on miniatures, and we will talk about exactly how they were made, how they were constructed in great detail as I learn more. And we'll also talk a little bit about preservation and care, because that was one of my initial concerns when I first bought my first miniature, which I'm going to show you in just a second, was, oh, I live in a very humid climate. Is this risky at all to it? Is there a chance that it's going to have any problems? So it's important to understand how to conserve them as well. All right, but before we get too far away from miniatures, we do need to talk about one of everyone's favorite topics, and that is lovers' eyes. So who are we looking at here? Well, this is the couple that essentially originated lovers' eyes. In 1785, Maria Anne Fitzherbert was the object of affection of Prince George, but she was widowed and it was not proper for her to marry him. And so she was really an unrequited love who tried to escape his affections. However, he wasn't going to take no for an answer. So he sent her the first lover's eye. And there was a letter with it that says, I send you a parcel. I send you at the same time an I. And I was capitalized, well, the E in I. And what did he send? Exactly that, a miniature painting of his eye. And this became synonymous with sort of a secret love, and it became sort of canonized as being part of the love language of the Georgian period, even though it really only was a trend that carried on till about 1830. Now, lovers' eyes, as we have talked about, they were often reproduced later. So some of the key details that you want to look for is that, generally speaking, you will have the eye, and you will also have a little bit of the sort of eyebrow detail or part of the face, as well as either a curl of hair or a tendril, but some other detail that should be sort of framing, and that's what helps tell us who the sitter is. Now, most of these were anonymous. It's very rare to see any kind of engraving because the idea was essentially that you are sending your eye, but it is for the lover only to know who it came from, which is why, exactly as Charlene's saying, it was meant to be incredibly romantic. So lover's eyes, again, they're very, very rare. Be very careful if you're in the market for one and buy from a reputable seller. And I would strongly suggest also getting it appraised once you have it in your possession, should you choose to buy one. They are not inexpensive. They're very precious and you will pay up for them, that's for sure. But a less expensive way of capturing one's likeness in the Georgian period was the silhouette. And so the silhouette essentially is exactly what it sounds like. It is a shadow painting. And so whole families could afford to get their silhouette portraits done. Now, the name silhouette came from Etienne de Silhouette. He had nothing to do with the art, but rather he was the French finance minister in the 18th century that was known for setting very harsh budgets and being extremely economical. And so it became known as getting a silhouette portrait done. And these were done sometimes in large format, which you can still find today online, and sometimes they were done in small format. If it was a large format, sometimes a sitter would actually sit in front of a screen and their likeness would be traced. Otherwise, they might sit or stand somewhere in the room and it would be recreated. And the output would be exactly that, a shadow painting or a silhouette. And in this case, we have a silhouette ring. There were two artists that were the most well-known during the Georgian period. There was Augustin Edouard, and there was another painter known as Mears that were extremely well-known. Those are sort of the sought-after names if you're trying to find one, and sometimes they're signed, but oftentimes they are not. Now, when you look at a silhouette ring, again, in the Georgian period, you are also going to hopefully find this carved out, rounded, domed bottom like we've seen on the other rings as well. It's one of the good telltale signs. And then the details really are what differentiate the different sitters. So there'll be details based on their clothing, their hair, their facial features, and all of that ties together who the sitter was. And again, this would have been the most economical way to obtain a portrait miniature of sorts during the period. And again, we've got that sort of hollowed out, rounded bottom that sits so comfortably on the finger. They should still make rings like this today. And finally, stylistically, we do need to touch on canitille. So again, gold was scarce. And so when one wanted gold jewelry, and especially if they wanted large gold statement jewelry, often it was hammered really thin and then rolled out. And then this could be sort of twisted and used to create all sorts of canitille designs. And so we will take a look at an example of canitille earrings from around 1810. Again, this also has a lot of the natural stylistic elements that one would expect of the Georgian period as well. And so here we've got some floral elements. If you look really, really closely, you can see that there's thin hammered layers as well as essentially what is wire work, or I like to call it spun gold or spun silver when it's done that way. And you can also see some of the details of the flat hammering with the repoussé hammering as well. And then we've got sort of that round wire spiral look too, that was very, very popular, that you will often see in canitille jewelry. Before we talk about revivals and reproductions, Deborah asks, what metal for less expensive jewelry? Essentially base metal, but even base metal was hard to work with in the Georgian period because they didn't have torches or any of the materials that came along with the Industrial Revolution. So in terms of building something to have the same look as gold, there was pinchbeck that was used. And pinchbeck was initially manufactured to give the look of gold for things like the outsets of a mirror or for a jewelry casket. Excuse me. And that was an alloy that was made with zinc and brass, has no gold in it. That is fairly commonplace too. And even pinchbeck now has become quite popular and is hard to find in terms of jewelry for collectors. Rolled gold, and which is like the predecessor to gold plating, was also another way to create less expensive jewelry than pure solid gold jewelry as well. So again, hammering sheets very, very thin, layering that over top of a base metal, maybe it's copper, and then using that to create the piece. All right, now we're going to talk about revivals and reproductions just briefly. But first, I'm going to introduce to you the first portrait miniature I ever bought. Now, there's a reason that I'm introducing this, and that is because it is part of the game, which is revivals, reproductions, or true period. We have 3 pieces here, and one of them is true Georgian period. So from between 1714 and 1837, although sometimes people say 35, some people say 30, but anyways, that window. And the other 2 are antique, but they are not true Georgian. So what I want to talk about is that revivals that come after the original period often draw from many of the elements, and they can use the same fabrication techniques, they can use the same materials, and that's why it's not always easy to date something, because you really need to understand the context around it. And we're very lucky because we also have the internet to support us with researching. Ooh, you're already guessing. I love it. Let me add this back to the stage, and I'll give you a few more hints as we go. So we have A, B, or C. A being the first miniature that I ever bought. B being a citrine brooch that I just love. C being my first online auction purchase from the UK. All right, let's go through some details. Now, when we look at A, she's got that romantic large hair, the soft billowy gowns that one would expect to see from around 1760, 1780, flowers in her hair. She's holding flowers. This picture feels familiar, doesn't it? There's something about it that when you look at it, you can't help but say, I think I've seen something that looks like this before. This is the backside. So the backside is tortoiseshell inlaid with silver. The outside is a base metal. And so that is really all there is to look at. However, I want to share with you that when I searched for this one and researched for it, I was able to find another very similar example. This is not the same miniature. You will notice that she has a slightly different pose, and she has a different sort of inlay on the back, yet everything else seems very similar. Let's compare her side by side to the one that I showed you from my collection. Don't they seem very similar? Now, that is one more tip that I'm going to give you, is that with Georgian jewelry, everything is completely hand fabricated. Sometimes you would have a large portrait that was painted for a person, and then smaller ones that were done for her to give away, or he to give away as gifts to others. But outside of that, it's very uncommon to see 2 identical pieces. That should be a little bit of a telltale sign. So when you are able to find items that look extremely similar, and if you keep looking and find that, this is a very common pose. In fact, this example is after one done by Vigier Lebrun, who was known to have painted Marie Antoinette. One can't help but scratch their head and say, do I believe that it is a true Georgian piece, or do I think it's a bit later? Now we'll look at B. Oh, see, this is why it's so much fun. B, we're going to look at as well. We talked about closed back settings being very common in the Georgian period, as well as collet settings. You'll note this has a short pin on it, shorter than one would expect, and you'll also notice that it is open back. And I am going to play a video on this one for you as well, so that you can see how it shimmers, because it is a beauty. Here it comes. Let me just remove one video first. StreamYard will only allow me to load 10 videos at a time, and I'm over my limit. Okay, here we go. Hi, Diane. Happy holidays. All right, so take a look at that. You know how we talked about being wary of collet settings that maybe look a little bit too symmetrical, possibly machine-made? Could that be a Victorian revival with its open back, as citrines were still very, very popular during the Victorian period as well? This is our citrine brooch example. And there's the side view. And finally, we have C. So C is a portrait miniature that is double-sided that came from an auction house in the UK. And this one is one that actually got lost in the mail, and I was very upset about this. It took a long time to come to me. And again, we'll take a look at a closer video, but you'll see it's large. It is very lightweight for its size. And there's a photo on front and back. And let me take you through the details of this one. And again, we are looking for the true Georgian piece. All right, there's the back. We obviously want to open up that pin brooch finding so that we can see this gentleman. This one is also painted. Now, if we take a look at their hinging, we can see how it was made in detail, and there are some marks on this. We've got a French hallmark, another French hallmark. That's a good sign to me, at least it's gold, as the person that bought this at auction. It is uncommon for Georgian jewelry to be hallmarked, but the French have been fastidious about hallmarking for a long, long time. So we have A, B, and C. And the question for you is, which one is true Georgian period? Which one are you skeptical about? Well, the answer, let's start with this one. This is indeed a portrait miniature of the French Revolution, well, pre-French Revolution revival type from the 1870s. So based on the stylistic details, but also from the tortoise shell on the back and the material this is made out of, it's a little bit more mass-produced in its case and its finding. So that is how we know that this is a fabulous antique that I'm thrilled to have in my collection, but it is not Georgian. Then we've got this citrine brooch. Boy, does it sparkle, and I do love that collet setting. But that collet setting, is closer to 1850. The citrines were very popular, and Queen Victoria did indeed love them. However, the opening up of the back of the setting started to happen around the mid-19th century, so circa 1850. And then we've got this beauty. So this gentleman, I call him Cornelius, by the way. He needed a name. And to me, he looks more English than French, and I consulted with a couple of other art dealers, and they felt the same way. But he is period appropriate stylistically based on what he is wearing and his haircut, as well as the construction and the painting techniques for being from around 1830. So this gentleman is indeed our Georgian gentleman. Awesome. All right. Thank you for playing. I'm going to scroll back and check the comments. You were all very good. We have a lot of C's in there. Thank you so much for playing alongside with me. Okay, I think I have caught up on all the comments. Amazing. Now, please make sure that you type #win all caps, just like this, to be entered in our giveaway. And we will be doing a giveaway for the Sundae Brunch mug. I am thrilled to say that Canada Post is no longer on strike and mail is moving, although some mail, especially international mail, seems to be moving a little bit slowly. But do get your hashtag win in, and we will draw a winner. And I hope you all have an absolutely fantastic rest of this year. If you don't have anything to do New Year's Eve, I suggest that you check out the extravaganza that's being held over at the Denim to Diamonds channel. And if any of you have other things that you want to share too, please feel free to do so. But I'll be joining Sue for part of it so that we can chat and make merry. We'll have lots of fun. But I am excited for the year ahead with all of you, and I really can't thank you enough for being part of this channel. There is a full list of things that I've been working on and putting together so that I can get more content out to you. And I think that I'm going to move to doing a combination of recorded videos that are a little bit shorter, but give you details on specific pieces and how to research them, as well as our Sunday brunches as well. So let's have some fun in 2024 for the rest of it, and 2025. Crazy Mustache, Mia, it's your birthday. Happy birthday in advance. I hope that this is going to be the best year yet. Now let's see how many people. We've got 29 entries in our drawing so far, and we are going to do that draw. I'm so happy to be back. And 2025, I think, is going to be shaping up to be a great year for everybody. Okay. Thank you so much, Peg. It is my pleasure. I am going to share my screen so that we can do the draw. Let me turn off this banner for a moment. There we go. Catch up on comments. And just because of the lag, I'm going to go a little bit slow, and we'll make sure that we give this at least 10 more seconds. Thank you so much, Jessica. I appreciate that. And I will take a look for your email. Okay, let's share the screen to do our giveaway so that we're not holding you all in suspense. We've got 29 entries, and I'm counting down from 10. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and good luck to everybody. Let's draw. And our winner is Slow Happy Vintage. Congratulations. Excellent. Please kindly send me an email at sundaebaubles@gmail.com, and I will arrange to have your mug shipped to you. And I will see you all again in January. I am just pulling up a calendar right now so I can give you what the date is likely to be. I have a couple travel dates coming up. I'm going to be at a conference the first week, so it is likely going to be some recorded videos the week of the 20th, and then a live coming up possibly on the 19th. But let me get back to you. I will put up the posting so that you can all see it sooner than not. Have a wonderful day. Happy New Year. Many blessings to everybody. We'll see you all soon. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much for being here.